Okay.
Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple moments for people to get settled, but so glad to have you here with us today. Go grab a cup of coffee. I know that was absolutely vital for today's webinar for me. Um, and we will get started in a moment. As a reasonable accommodation, we are letting AI note takers into the room. Yeah, if you are concerned about that, let us know and we can boot them. But generally, they are extremely helpful for those who cannot take notes. It's really good to see so many friends. I'm seeing so many friends. Look at you guys from all over the place. Oh, and there's another Josie. That's even better. That makes it all worth the while. All right, guys, we're going to get started. So, welcome today to our first RAISE webinar of 2026. And I'm really excited to have you all here with us. I'm going to turn it over to Miriam for all of our accessibility announcements, and then I'll introduce the webinar.
You can move to
Next
the
slide,
next
someone.
slide. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon. My name is Miriam Elissa. I am part of the RAISE team. I'm explaining how to use some of the Zoom features for accessibility. We have closed captioning provided by Zoom. If you need closed captioning, just click on CC on your screen. It has been activated. And we also have an interpretation to Spanish. Para acceder al canal en español, van a ver en la banda o cinta negra un globo que indica Interpretation. Haga clic allí y luego seleccionan donde dice Español y oprimen donde dice Mute Original Audio. Esto último filtra completamente la señal en inglés para que puedan escuchar con claridad a nuestro intérprete de hoy, Guillermo. We also have American Sign Language. So our interpreter, Dina, has been spotlighted over there. And you can, if it's not on your screen, you can spotlight yourself by clicking on the three dots next to Dina's screen, and then you can spotlight Dina. We have the chat is open for interactions between the interpreter, the presenters and the audience. We also have the Q&A, which is ideal for asking questions to the presenters. And, all right, so the next slide, please, and pass it to Josie.
Okay, so again, guys, welcome. I'm Josie, and I'm really excited to have you all hear about a program that I have loved for many years called April, and to introduce you to a couple of my friends, Elissa and Michael. I've worked alongside them or doing similar work for a long time, but I think where our paths cross is how important we feel serving rural individuals, including youth, really is, and especially in that transition area. And we've heard over and over from all of you how difficult and important serving folks in rural areas are and continues to be. So I want to welcome our guests and turn it over to them.
All right. Hey, let's give a big round of love and support for everybody that got this call and got us all together today. Thank you, Josie, for that introduction. My name is Michael Beers, pronouns he, him. I have comb back black hair and a goatee with a brown shirt on kind of a salmon t-shirt with my office in the background for a visual representation. And I am the program outreach and advocacy manager for April, as well as the interim youth services coordinator. So, and with that, I will toss it over to our executive director, my boss and friend, Elissa, to do a brief introduction.
Thanks, Michael. My name is Elissa Ellis. I am the Executive Director for Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living. I'm an olive-skinned woman with long, dark, curly hair, which is pretty fluffy today. And I have been with April for 25 plus years. Started back in 2001 as administrative assistant and have just committed my life to this organization. April was created back in 1986 to address the very specific needs of people with disabilities living in rural America with little to no services. And we have grown from there, and we are just so thankful to be in this space and reconnect with Josie, who has, um, I was just so happy to see her name come across my email. And I'm really happy to be able to address this this Raise Center and talk about our youth programs. So I won't take up any more of your time. I will pass it back to Michael, who will get into it.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa. The slide before you, I'll read real quick and talk a little bit about April as an organization. The Associated Programs of Rural Independent Living is a national grassroots nonprofit membership organization consisting of over 260 members from Centers for Independent Living, their satellites and branch offices, statewide independent living councils, other organizations, and individuals concerned with the independent living issues of people with disabilities in rural America. So, briefly, for anybody unfamiliar with independent living or centers for independent living, they are it's an independent living philosophy that began in the 60s and 70s and really manifested itself into centers for independent living. And without taking up the entire presentation to go over that, one of the founding members, Ed Roberts, is one of the people we hold up as far as history. There were thousands of people, but Ed Roberts is one of the bigger names, and he defined independent living in this philosophy that these member centers and state independent living councils all share as independent living being the fundamental idea that everyone has a future. That's it. Hard. I mean, there's a lot of programs, there's five core services, there's policy, there's a lot of stuff we do in that mission, but understanding that we fundamentally believe that everyone has a future kind of encapsulates that in a sentence. So all 50 states have independent living centers and a state independent living council, as well as some of the territories of the U.S. So that is a bulk of our membership. Happy to answer any questions about that as we go. Our mission, the Associated Programs of Rural Independent Living, is a national disability-led organization advancing the equity of people with disabilities in rural communities through advocacy, collaboration, shared experience, leadership development, education, and training. April is is a unified voice for rural America. So we've said it a few times. Our focus really is rural and understanding that as a person with a disability in rural communities, the conversation's different when it comes to, especially to transportation and access to certain services. April's statement of community. Uh, April is a membership organization dedicated to advancing the rights of people with disabilities in rural America. We strive to cultivate a culture of inclusivity throughout our organization, which reflects that our membership, we believe that diversity is an asset to be valued and respected. April recognizes the uniqueness of each individual and uplifts the characteristics and intersectionality within the human experience. Okay. So the bulk of our conversation to do today is our youth programs. So BYOB, bringing youth on board. As somebody who's been involved with April for a number of years, Alyssa and I have that in common. I haven't been involved as long, but we certainly share a love for the organization going back a long time. So my first interaction with April was in 2003 as one of, I believe, five youth at the conference. So April, we'll talk about this more later, has a national conference every year that a lot of people have referred more to as a reunion because of the community feel that it represents. And as a 21-year-old, I remember feeling that right away. I remember being nervous. I remember not wanting to talk to anybody, but being amazed at what I saw. As a person with a disability, especially a young person from a rural community, it's not very often that you find yourself in a space where you're the majority. Um, and that can be life changing because you're always used to being the only one or only one of a few people. So to be in an atmosphere where everyone has a disability, or a majority of the people do, and not only that, but they are people who are professionals and have family lives and are really experts in their field, and to be around that as a young person for the first time, I remember being a really cool experience. So the reason there were only four youth at that conference is because back then it wasn't very common for national organizations to include youth intentionally. So we're a relatively young movement as far as disability rights and disability and independent living. So it was around the turn of the century that people started saying, "Hey, we're going to have leadership retire. The people that started us aren't always going to be around. So what are we doing to engage with young people and not only get their voices, but understand what issues they're dealing with?" So fast forward to the next year, we had about 10 young people in Hawaii, and our task was to figure out what April's youth programs would look like. So at that time, there was a lot of youth advisory councils. So separate boards of young people that would essentially write a report or give a presentation to the rest of the board. Um, so even though our task was to figure out what a youth advisory council would look like, the 10 or so youth that were there really were like, hey, we're on a lot of these things. You got to come up with policies and bylaws and all of this. Somebody's got to take minutes. And after a day of talking, we really decided, you know what, our recommendation is not to have a youth advisory council. Our recommendation is to have a youth on the board of directors. Now, we didn't know what this would be, how this would be received by the board, but April's original executive director, Linda Gonzalez at the time, and the board said, absolutely. Why didn't we think of this? Of course, there should be a young person on our board rather than having a youth advisory council. A young person with the same voting power and the same level of importance as everybody else. Uh, because really, when you think about it, a youth advisory council, unless you run it a certain way, ends up being a kids' table at Thanksgiving. So April was one of the first national organizations, or first national organization, to say, no, we're putting a youth on our board. And that decision um, by that group of young people and the acceptance of the board really set April's DNA for the next until today. Uh, because it isn't a kids table. It's built into our DNA. Every decision we make has youth input, and has youth in transition at its core. So it's not a matter of checking in with the youth; it's a matter of having it baked into everything we do. And as a young person who's experienced the April conference, as an attendee, and as somebody who's helped um, really uh, be a part of what it looks like at the conference. It really is cool to see young people who have never felt that really open their eyes to a different language for what is possible. Because I think that's really, from our perspective, we have independent living centers as members, but we ourselves at April are not an independent living center. So we're not often providing direct services beyond what we do at the conference. What we're doing is supporting those independent living centers to go out there and be in the classroom and talk about disability history and culture and transition, and work with young people to understand what their issues are now, um, and how the independent living community can support that and be that community and resource as well. So, on the right of your screen, you'll see Youth Steering Committee. So from the board position, the other major youth program that started back then was a youth conference as part of our yearly annual conference. So on the Friday before the conference kicks off, this is an opportunity for young people from across the country who are connected to youth leadership forums, independent living centers, primarily to come and spend a day with other young leaders across the country to advance their leadership skills, learn from their mentors, find a mentor, have an unfiltered conversation about what it feels like in school, what it feels like outside of school, and what some of those barriers might be. And to really, emphasize who and be seen as entire people who have a lot to give back. So that's another independent living philosophy, and something that April really likes to shine a spotlight on individuals by making them understand that yes, you have a disability, but that makes you a part of a community that is diverse and powerful. And your narrative isn't just about what you need. So, speaking personally, and I know this is echoed a lot in the audience we have here today. The narrative for a young person growing up with a disability very often is what you need. You need this program, you need that doctor, you need these services, and it's help me, Um, and it can be hard. It can be hard to accept that help in the form of accommodations or others, because it makes you feel different. You're not a part of the group because you have extra time on your test, or you have books on audio, or you have a PCA. Um, but part of what really helps in the understanding of why those things are important and the role they play in our lives is that they allow us to help other people. So for me, it was always a struggle to accept accommodations, but it was an understanding that me accepting that accommodation allows me to help other people, and allows me to show up as myself for other people. And I think that's a big part of the narrative that we don't always focus on, and that we try to shine a light on at the April Youth Conferences. That idea that yes, you have something to give back. Um, so our youth steering committee is primarily in charge of planning that conference throughout the year, as well as uh, producing other virtual programming and kind of checking in with our youth community. So the youth steering committee calls are open to youth. April defines youth as 13 to 30 ish. um, and that was a decision made a while back to both allow for, students who are just about to start that high school journey and then all the way through transition, going up to age 30. So understanding that, as an individual, this cutoff of 18 isn't always appropriate. Sometimes we need a little bit extra time. Sometimes we didn't start at the same time as everybody else. Sometimes we acquire a disability, and that affects it. So, generally 13 to 30-ish are allowed on those calls, and they are at 7 p.m. Eastern. And our next meeting will be on March 9th. So, next Monday. So, a week from today. Okay. Um, so as April has advanced their youth programs, we have also, in an effort to support the youth coordinators. So a youth coordinator is typically a staff member at an independent living center whose focus is on transition. So working with a high school student um, to help them transition from high school and, a system of IEPs, idea to what does life look like when you're about to take that next step, whether that's work, whether that's college, whether that's traveling across Europe. That's not for us to decide. Our job as youth coordinators is to make you uh, feel confident and understanding that any accommodation that you're receiving in high school under IDEA will transfer over to life outside. It's going to look different though, and that's where the community supports. Because now instead of going to one IEP to get your accommodations, your services, to check in with people on how you're doing, what could be doing better, in the world outside of that, that one meeting becomes 30 meetings and applications and denial letters and waiting lists. And how do you navigate all of this as a young person with a disability, in addition to all those other life challenges that anyone faces? A big part of the independent living philosophy is that peer connection. Understanding that, hey, you don't know what you don't know. And who better to support you than a community of people who, on some level, understand that. So it might not be, someone with the same disability you have, but it might be a group of peers who know what it is to navigate those various issues in transition. So our youth coordinator connect calls are an opportunity for youth coordinators from across the country once a month to come in and talk shop. What's working? What's not working? What are they seeing in the schools? How are we responding to that? In the last few months, we've opened up our youth coordinator calls to not just independent living staff, but youth leadership forum coordinators and staff. So, briefly, a youth leadership forum is an opportunity for young people with disabilities to get together, very often on a college campus during the summer, to talk about transitioning, talk about goal setting, independent living philosophies, disability history and culture, and really just have them focused on themselves and what their plan looks like, whether they're still in high school or that next couple years. So I believe as of right now there are 22 states that have youth leadership forums, and they really are a magical place. And there's a lot in common with youth coordinating and YLFs. So it just made sense to open up that call to people. To create that peer environment. So those calls happen the first Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern. So our next one is tomorrow, March 3rd. So if you are somebody that works in the schools or has a focus on transition um, for students with disabilities, you're welcome to be a part of that conversation as well. We have a Discord that we use. We just got one of our members to walk us through as a way for us to keep in contact in between the monthly calls. It's also a great opportunity for us to learn something in a platform that a lot of our students use and are familiar with. So it's kind of served both roles that way. Partnerships. We for a long time have had a really great um, relationship with the Ford Foundation. They are the primary backer of our youth programs. Um, and not just financially, but the our contact person, Rebecca Coakley, who some of you may know, has been at our conference, has participated in our youth, and very much grown up with that generation that Josie and I are a part of. So a lot of great support from the Ford Foundation. Um, we've they helped us launch our Lead On program, our Lead On Collaborative, which is a 6 to 8 week course that youth from across the country, very often that have been to the conference once or twice or a YLF, can participate to just kind of level up in that video game of leadership. And then we offer an opportunity to come to the conference as part of that as well. So we're kind of reformatting what Lead On looks like right now, but it is a part of our youth programming and something we hope to collaborate with Rise on in the future. Cool. And if I'm missing anything in the chat, or people have questions before we get to that section, please let me know, and we'll meet you where you're at.
Yeah, there's a question on the
Yeah.
Q&A.
Okay.
And okay, hold on one second.
Mm, copy that.
Actually, it was answered by Elissa.
Mm,
Yeah, can anyone from any state join the um, youth call as long as you are in age bracket? Yes.
yes, absolutely. So
Is there a disability requirement too, Mike?
a disability requirement. Only as far as independent living standards, I guess would be
Okay.
the way to put it. So independent living centers are cool for a lot of reasons. A couple of them are that we don't require documentation, like other services like Voc Rehab or Social Security, which have to for obvious reasons. But at an independent living center, we really, if you identify with disability and it is a part of your life, and you walk through our door, that's all we need to know. We don't need to have a doctor's note or any kind of documentation. So that transitions into our national programs. So if you're a person that identifies with disability, that's the only requirement we have
Yeah.
for participation.
There's another question from Devin. How do we get
Yeah.
on the email list?
Email list. You can go to our website, which we'll have toward the end of the slides. I believe it was on the last one too. Yep. Well, there's Elissa's email address, and there's also a way to get on our listserv if you visit our website.
Um, Elissa also put your website in the chat. So it's www.april-rural.org.
Nice. Cool, cool. I always like to deal with questions as they come up because I'm that student who, like, if I had a question at the very beginning and the teacher said, "Hey, you have to wait till the end," one of two things would happen. One, I would concentrate so hard on remembering what my question was, I would tune you out for the rest of the time. So you essentially sounded like the Charlie Brown teacher. Rah, 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 rah. Or I would focus on what you were saying, But then when you came back to me at the end and said, "What's your question?" I'd be like, burrito," which tends to be my response whenever I don't know what to say. But we don't have time to get into that. All right, next slide. Building community with transition groups nationwide. This is really why we're excited to be a part of this group and this community. Um, when we talked about giving this presentation today, we're obviously excited about our youth programs and the independent living network that we're a part of as April. But we understand we're not the only people out there doing it. And to be a part of any conversation and to be able to really focus on what opportunities are out there for young people, especially when they get out of high school, um, is really important to us. So this slide is building community with transition groups nationwide. Um, uh, so really, a lot of the conversation that Josie and I have had in the last couple months, along with Everett and a lot of YLF coordinators, is understanding once a high school student goes through high school and maybe they find a youth leadership forum like we talked about, or the April conference, or some combination of the two. What happens in these environments, like I mentioned before, is that you may be a young person with a disability that has felt isolated and alone and misunderstood and all these different things for a bulk of your life. Maybe you spend a lot of energy trying to emulate people that you view as normal at the expense of your own health and your own education because you don't have that identity. You don't have that comfort level with other people with disabilities. So what happens when you go to a YLF or an IL conference? You're infused with identity, you're infused with confidence, you're infused with connection at a level that you've never felt before, which is incredible. It's incredible to be in those spaces. It's the reason I'm still doing this work, that a lot of people are. But it's also understanding that these are kind of a flash in the pan. A YLF is 1 week out of a summer. And as somebody who's staffed one in Montana for a number of years, it's always hard to recruit young people because they don't know what it is. They have an idea of what it might be, and that's not where they want to go. But to get staff to come back to the program, we get 3 times as many applications for staff because they know what that feeling is because they had it last year. Um, and they can't wait to get back to it. So, but that's just 1 week. The April conference is once a year. So, what do you do with a young person who has a new focus on identity, a new level of confidence, and a new level of, just motivation to get out there and be a part of something when they get back to their rural community, whether it's Two Dot, Montana, or Sheboygan? Not really sure which state Sheboygan is. I don't know why I said it. But it might not even be rural. But the idea is you don't have that community to tap into once you get back home. So what can we do as independent living centers, as a network of people that work with high school students that are people with disabilities to make sure that when you need it, those programs are out there or we can connect you to it, whether it's an independent living center or Yeti or, any other opportunity. And how can we be coordinating as national organizations to, yeah, help support each other so those youth have a home to go to and can develop those leadership skills. So with this slide, I wanted to pose a question for this call and for if you want to participate in the chat. So a big part of what we've been doing lately in these spaces where we talk about youth in transition and people with disabilities, as it says at the very bottom of the slide. Um, uh, to be we want to be innovative and responsive to the needs and barriers of youth with disabilities. We cannot afford to be the best youth program 2010 had to offer. We must always be aspiring to uh, to uh, to be more by working with each other. So a lot of these spaces have started talking about, not just the programs we offer and historically have always. And this isn't to say that any of these things aren't an issue anymore, but it's maybe understanding more context of what young people are dealing with. So, for since the time I've been involved in this work, we have had programs and funding around transportation, around housing, and around employment, which are three cornerstones that any youth should be addressing. Um, but as somebody who has worked in high school student with high school students in high school settings and working on transition, those aren't always the barriers that the audience is talking about, or that if you're really listening, that the audience needs addressed first. So the question and the conversation I'd like to have is, what programs out there or what value does this community put in addressing two issues that I really think are pretty universal to disability? So, disability is understanding that we're all individuals, and we don't all have the same needs, even if we have the same diagnosis. But our culture is made up of some common threads. And these are two of them in the very anecdotal conversations we've had with people across the country. Is we don't intentionally deal with loneliness as a barrier, and we don't very often intentionally focus on building confidence in individuals with disabilities. So, what value do the people in the audience think addressing loneliness and building confidence in students has? And really, are there programs or ideas you have that you can talk about? Because I think that's the big theme of this slide is there are some innovative programs out there, and there are some people thinking about old questions in a new way. But they might not be getting the spotlight or might not have the vehicle to really, affect more people. And that's a bulk of what we want to be a part of as April with our youth programs going forward, is answering some of those questions.
Okay, so everyone put it in the chat if possible. I think that potentially Miriam can unmute if you raise your hand, if that's an accommodation you need. While you guys are throwing your thoughts in the chat, there was a question, Mike.
Yeah.
It was really the old question of how do we find rural youth, right?
Mm.
Whether it's in high schools or outside, which I actually think is a lot harder. So is there a way that you guys do it? And I kind of personally, you know, I'm rural as well. And so once you find a rural youth that's interested, I feel like they bring along their buddies. But how do you find that person?
Yeah. In working with youth leadership forums, as well as an IL center in April, it's a lot of in rural spaces. It's a lot of how we do anything. It's who you know, and getting to where people are at. So, a lot of what we've done as an IL center to get young people involved is to meet them where they're already at in the schools. So and a lot of the youth coordinators that join our monthly calls have some version of a advocacy and leadership curriculum that they'll take into the schools and work with a special ed coordinator or case manager to identify what those which classes would work. A lot of times it's a job focused, a vocational focused class, or a resource study hall that we get invited into. So, um, and then from there, that's where a lot of the programming at centers involves. So it's meeting them in high school, and then, you know, as an independent living center and a youth coordinator, you are somebody that can sit in an IEP as an advocate, and as part of that team, and you can transition with that student. So where their case managers, and the school can't follow them to that next step, an independent living center can. Um, so really, putting it out there. Social media has been another way, and really, I think something that a lot of centers are doing now is building that community to address the issue of loneliness, building communities based on interest and not necessarily just disability.
Yeah.
So, let's play a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons,
Right.
or have an adaptive yoga class, um, movie making, all kinds of things in a way to get youth interested, and then understand that through those conversations, through fun, through play, you're going to hit those other areas. The more comfortable a young person is with the program and the more invested they feel in it, the more likely they're going to be having conversations with you about, oh, I'd really like to get my own apartment someday. Or, I've always wanted to know more about, veterinary services. And then it's your job to say, oh, okay, that's pause the game. Let's have a conversation about this. So those are a couple ways, kind of outside the box
Yeah.
to
Yeah, and I
identify.
think there's rural groups like FFA, 4-H that are not typical disability programs, but they have youth. And I
Mhm.
like my leadership started with 4-H, and so sometimes it's going into programs like 4-H, FFA, and saying, how can we support this program to make it accessible and inclusive for
Mhm.
youth to be a part of? That doesn't in itself bring youth to like disability spaces, but we all have to find leadership and a community somewhere, and that's a great start. Um, and then uh, thinking through this loneliness piece, I mean, Mike, you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and there was a time I made worked with Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh to develop programs to make a patient advocacy group, and we did a gaming night with all like different type of gaming equipment. They actually now have really cool like full facilities. A lot of colleges do too, where it's all gaming and gaming leagues. So sometimes it's having like a fully accessible event like that, but it's building that trust based on interest. Don't just get people with disabilities together just because they all have disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put purpose behind it.
Mhm.
There was a question or a comment. Hold on. Game Youth Evolved. There are a lot of folks talking about different ways that they're connected with youth engagement, but I think that loneliness piece is throughout all of this. How do we get youth to not be lonely? And one of the problems I'm seeing is, youth are going home after school, and I saw it mentioned somewhere else, whether it be that we're teaching that home is safer, whether it be there's so much more fun and accessible activities via gaming. Um, but I think the most important development often happens in person.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's where, a couple of things I think in conversations Josie and I've had with other people across the country is really, yeah, getting a national focus back on that um, in-person event. So, like I mentioned, we have our Lead On program that is primarily and our youth steering committee, which is primarily over Zoom. When I got involved, I remember being on conference calls with Josie back in the day, where before we had Zoom. But it leads up to, the in-person opportunity at the April conference. And back in the day, there used to be, when I was coming up with Josie and that whole class of people from the early 2000s, there were multiple opportunities through like National Youth Leadership Network to go to DC and develop those leadership skills to take back to your communities. And they were dynamic. They were incredible. They had speakers that, really, really built the stage as far as leadership and disability in this country. Um, but beyond that, it was the peer connection. It was, young people from Montana meeting young people from Pennsylvania and Kansas and North Carolina and Puerto Rico and all these different places and those in between the session times that we were, now when we look back on it, that's what built our culture and that's what built our confidence to be able to go back into some of these other spaces. And there's just not that as many opportunities like that anymore.
Right.
And really, hopefully, this collaboration, this conversation, this community, that's one of the outcomes we'd really like to see is more opportunity for youth to get in person and spending time with each other. Because they're going to have the next idea. They're going to have the next best idea. They're going to have the next barrier that we should all come across. But it's not going to happen necessarily in a Zoom box. That might be where it starts. And to Josie's point, yeah, about taking something like video gaming, and yes, that can be isolating. So a lot of what happens to our young people is that they, even if they have a good high school experience with a great teacher, they can be very employable and very, connected to that school the day before they graduate. But the day after they graduate, their automatic community goes away, which was the school. And they might be on a waiting list for a couple years for employment services, for personal care, for housing, whatever it is. So, in that time, yeah, you do find a community online or, through video gaming. But video gaming doesn't have inherently have to be isolated. So one thing that a lot of centers do will host a game night or a game afternoon where you open up a space to have accessible gaming, to have board games, to have all these things that were isolating, but now you're doing it as a part of a community who also loves it. So it's, developing that language, which I think is another huge part of what IL centers and April can do, is, and we were joking on a call the other day, it's not that just two generations of people have all decided that they want to be video game testers, um, YouTube stars, and in the military. It's very often, and people want to do that, but very often it's because that's the only language that the youth have developed. Because video gaming, you don't need friends. YouTube is free. And, for better and worse, we've done nothing but glorify military service in our movies and advertising and stuff for generations. So, is it that these are the only three things, or is it that because your culture to this point has been more isolated and more focused on therapies and doctors and treatment than your peers, that that's the only language you have to express what you're feeling? So a lot of what happens when we come in person or a youth gets involved with any of these programs and share a space with other people is it's not just addressing loneliness, it's developing their language so they can better communicate what they're actually feeling um, rather than, the just expressing what they've had access to. Uh, so I also have to preface this with I have a doctorate in anecdotal evidence. So So this is the word on the street. This is the conversations that are having. And if there's research to back any of this up, or an opportunity to do research to see if these things are, you know, put some science behind these ideas, that's a part of the equation that we don't have on the team yet. So I think that would be something valuable if that's in anybody's skill set. Uh,
Well, and I want to add to what you were saying,
yeah.
Mike. Like, I think that so many of the parent centers, maybe SILs, like they're offering really great training, self-advocacy, self-determination. But I can tell you as a teenager, that was the last program I was going to sign up for. I
Yeah.
wanted to go be with the cool kids, whatever that was. I guess hanging out with Mike and his buddy Travis.
Mhm.
But I wanted to do fun stuff. I want to be like all the other cool kids. And I, like heck, would go to a disability self-advocacy training. But that's where having and being youth coordinators is so cool because I think that we are able to take the ideas of what youth are doing, what they want to do, and then weave into that these messages, sort of like the old after school specials. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think sometimes we forget that these are young adults. They are thinking about having the next boyfriend or girlfriend, going to the prom, someday driving. Whether that's going to be something they're able to do or not, that's their mindset. And so, how do we ensure that we are hitting their interest points while also providing those more important, larger life skills?
Yeah, absolutely well said, Josie. And I like to think about when these issues of confidence and addressing loneliness as, another word that gets thrown around a lot is resiliency. So
Yes.
a community of people around you and the confidence in yourself to keep going or to ask that question, or to advocate, those are the skills that make you resilient, beyond the next best program. Or, there's always a great program, there's always a great person in charge of a program, but there's always turnover, whether it's loss of funding or somebody moves on from their job. So without that piece that makes you resilient, you're left at the whim of the program and whether it's funded or whether it's available. So they're great, but if you can combine that with a community of people that isn't going anywhere, and the confidence in yourself to actually use the information in the brochure instead of just having it, that's what builds resiliency. And in the success that I see, in young people, it's, if you address the context for why those other things are important, you have a lot better success. So it's not linear. It's not graduate high school, go to college, get transportation, get a house, and then you can address the things that Josie talked about: a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a family, pets. It's not, you have to be addressing all of those things at every level, because those things are the context for why you do anything. And I think that's why, we all learned this a little bit in the pandemic, whether we focused on it or not. So for every young person who, doesn't transition right away after high school and ends up on a waiting list, you might be having to have a conversation 2 years around down the road about hygiene, about appropriate dress, about, all of these soft skills. But you don't realize if you're not using these things, you don't, they fall in value. And that happened to all of us. As soon as we were told to stay at home, how long did it take you to, stop wearing dress pants? And, to stop grooming yourself from the shoulders down every day because you didn't have to, because you weren't using it. So yeah, really addressing the context of why we do these other things, I think is important. So I know we have about 5 minutes left. We'll go through these last couple slides real quick. There are opportunities to further engage with April and all of our programming And again, these are open to members. We'll talk about how to get involved. So here's a membership. You can join as an organization or an individual, and that gives you access to a lot of these things on the screen. Action to our action alerts. We send out monthly kind of newsletters and then action items as they come up, which they come up a lot lately. Uh, um, so any questions about that? There's a link to the portal to become a member as well. Here we also, in addition to our youth program, so these we have youth involved in all of these programs from time to time, but these are the programs we have outside of youth specific. We have emergency preparedness and response. So, how do people in rural areas be prepared for natural disasters, zombie apocalypse, natural things of that nature? Those are the second Monday of the month at 3 Eastern. We have an advocacy, overall advocacy committee, and this is people in independent living philosophy, working in disability, our allies getting together to really talk about what the current advocacy issues are, what are issues that we need to be focusing on in the future. And here's our next conference. Our next conference will be in Niagara Falls, October 23rd through the 25th. And you can get more information by visiting our website or emailing.
Thank you guys so much. I want to quickly address a couple questions. So we've had some really interesting comments about public libraries. One of which is, maybe starting peer groups at them, but then also how to share information with libraries about opportunities like April. And so I think now I am not a library person. I can honestly say that I got a doctorate and never went to a library. But the every library is so very different. And so I am certain there are library groups, like there are networks, but I think these are great things to share. And I think the comment from Brenda kind of ties with Deborah's comment. You might not know it, but for so much of the work that we do, there isn't real funding. Now, both Michael, you guys got some support from the Ford Foundation. We have some support from the Rehab Service Administration, but it's never clean cut. It's often here. Can we weave youth engagement into this? Where can we find money for accommodations? And it's often piecemeal, but it's about the determination. So much of it's stuff that you could find partners in your communities to host events if you're willing to organize. And no one wants that answer because everyone needs support, but it's often true. It's a piecemealing thing, and I think that a big part of what Mike and myself, our Yeti group with Raise and NTAC, we're all trying to figure out how can we better bring these youth programs together so that we're not duplicating services, that we're doing things that get to all youth. And anyone who's interested, I hope that you stay involved, reach out to April or us. But Michael, any final comments, or Elissa?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad Elissa pointed it out in the chat. So April is working on a grant with the University of Montana called the Creative Collaborations for Rural Empowerment, Libraries and Independent Living Partnerships. So that's another great. And I think finally, another term that is has kind of floated around our conversations is audience-based programming. So everybody wants to say evidence-based programming, which there is something to be said for that. But if you're trying to innovate, if you're trying to answer a question that no one's found an answer to yet, there isn't necessarily going to be evidence-based practices to lean on. So we also like to throw into that term audience-based programming. So your programming is based on what the audience is hearing, or you're hearing from the audience and what the audience is saying rather than what's being funded or what is the current grant cycle is in love with. Because sometimes those match up, very often those are behind what is actually being dealt with by a student. And there is that disconnect. So I think Josie's point, let's start with audience-based programming. Let's make it intentional. And the first thing you got to do when working with any group, I think, but with youth, you got to care and you got to listen. And those don't cost any money. And what this network can do is help answer some of those questions for each other. So yeah, if you do have a dynamic program that is working on literally a shoestring budget because you took the lace out of your shoe to do an icebreaker game, and you're running on a dollar store account and passion, this network maybe can be a part of the, hey, is there a Ford Foundation? Is there a foundation we've never heard of? Is there somebody doing this work that we can get a little money for? But it's got to start with passion. I think that's what young people respond to the most. That's what got me involved, and a lot of us. It wasn't a program or a brochure. It was somebody speaking passionately about what they care about and seeing us for the first time in a real way. So if you don't have any money, that's a good place to start.
Thank you all so much. If you haven't uh, gotten the information before, we always send out the recording and materials after the webinar. So you will receive that. Please continue to join us if this is your first time. And we're really excited to have you. Hope that you consider going to the April conference in October. I'm hoping to be there as well. It's a great event. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We are always here. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
All right. Good luck out there, everybody.